joy. I want that joy. Hey, I want that joy. I want that joy every day.
So there is a few important things I want to get out of you today. Also for the audience who are watching here in the United States and in Middle East and around the world, because the show would be aired in Africa as well. In American books, curriculum in the American books, when you educate kids here, first thing they grow up black, they were enslaved in the United States, and I think that have psychological effect on the kids. If I grow up and it shows that I was slave, how could I be grow up in society to be successful? How can I grow up? And it's the back of my mind, always I was enslaved. I came as a slave. I hear in TV I was a slave. Everything that slave, slave, slave. And which is not true, because black people, they were not slave in Africa. They were king, they were queen, they were imperial, they were successful. So I think I want to talk to people working with you and in the Congress that we need to have certain amendments, certain new law to change in the school books that the black history did not start with being slave.
If you are born on American soil, you are an American. Your roots might be in another country. And so, my question to her, how do you explain a Tiger Woods? Why can't we call ourselves African Americans, Chinese Americans, Japanese Americans, and so on and so forth? And that is what you will find on the census form. Remember, we take it every 10 years, so we will take the census in 2020 again. And you will find those on the census form. And everybody, I don't care what country, what nation they're in, they have the greatest respect for the United States of America.
Very important and special for me, since I'm African American, and I'm proud to be African American.
Is where I said I love you. You were kind of shy. Seemed like you were in the chrome
Pleasure. I was so inspired by being a young woman myself that hearing her stories, becoming the first African American woman in the California State Senate.
When I was voted into the California State Senate from the school board, when I got there, they said, "We don't want you here." And I would respond by saying, when he ran for this seat and I ran, I simply got more votes than he did. And he owns 7 businesses in South Bay. And I came out with the most number of votes. And then I would do a pause and I would say, can any of you vouch with getting over 80% of the vote? And then they left me alone. I was the only second person in the California State Senate at that time to have an earned PhD. Paul Carpenter he was the first to have an earned PhD. I was the second. So I let them know who I was, you see. And that's what I think Barack Hussein Obama was all about. You believe in yourself. And Barack Hussein Obama was the chair of the Harvard Law Review. He also studied out here at Occidental College. And then he is a constitutional attorney. He's a constitutional scholar.
So my next question, what is President Obama's biggest achievement?
Well, it's the AARC. This is, originally, when it was passed, it was access to affordable health care. Now it's Obamacare, or affordable health care. He implemented it. And you see 20 million people are on it. You cannot remove that program overnight. it will take years. People will die if they don't get affordable health care. And so your nation is only as strong as your people are. So that's one of his greatest achievements. He saved the automobile industry. And he took federal funds and put them in place so they could continue to build automobiles. And I'm just hearing that China is going to be buying our Cadillacs, you know. So that's one of his achievements. He also, the environmental laws he put in place. Also, he had relationships with Iran and Iraq. And these are his finest achievements. It looks like under this new administration, we are retrogressing, being pushed back rather than progressing. And we need to be a world leader. We need to honor NAFTA, National Atlantic Treaty Organization. We need them as our ally.
Next question, we talked about the biggest achievement for President Obama, and you mentioned Obamacare. So what's his biggest failure while he was in the White House?
I didn't recognize any failures. Where I think there was lacking is that his meeting with other governments and all was not followed through into this new administration. And so there is nothing that you can say negative about his 2 terms in office.
My next question, what do you think about his foreign policy? Everybody say he has a big failure in his foreign policy. What do you think about
Well, that's what I was saying. The foreign policy that he developed with Iran and Iraq wasn't followed through on. And you see, with this new administration, unless they followed through and respected his meetings with them, that can be looked at as a failure of this new administration. But I think he probably should have emphasized it more with the new administration.
Next question, we talked about the biggest achievement for President Obama, and you mentioned Obamacare. So what's his biggest failure while he was in the White House?
I didn't recognize any failures. Where I think there was lacking is that his meeting with other governments and all was not followed through into this new administration. And so there is nothing that you can say negative about his 2 terms in office.
My next question, what do you think about his foreign policy? Everybody say he has a big failure in his foreign policy. What do you think about
Well, that's what I was saying. The foreign policy that he developed with Iran and Iraq wasn't followed through on. And you see, with this new administration, unless they followed through and respected his meetings with them, that can be looked at as a failure of this new administration. But I think he probably should have emphasized it more with the new administration.
President Obama? Given $150 billion to Iran, which is not our alliance, and also they sponsor terrorists, they sponsor Hamas, they sponsor Hezbollah, they sponsor the Muslim Brotherhood, the extremist group, don't you think, and they are against our alliance with Saudi Arabia, our good friend and alliance with the United States, and he given $150 billion to Iran to sponsor all this activity in Middle East. Don't you think this is a big failure for Obama administration?
He did not give it to them to sponsor all of that.
Correct.
He gave it, and it started under Bush, and it was Iraq. And he made them sovereign. We gave a resolution allowing President Bush to use whatever tools he had in his tool case, or whatever he thought was right. And so Iraq was the big issue at the time. It was Iran that President Barack Hussein Obama met with and agreed that they needed to be given certain donations from this country to help them rise up. Now, there were radicals that formed, ISIS and all these other groups.
So be precise.
And so he did not give that money
So yes
to
or no,
them.
given 150 billion, it's a good decision or bad decision?
I think it was a good decision if it were used the right way.
But it was not, they're not using the right way. They fight in Saudi Arabia, our biggest alliance.
My answer to your question, it was a good decision. Now, on the other side, the responsibility was for them as a sovereign nation to use it responsibly.
The second question, Obama administration supported the extremist group, the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, to take power in Egypt in 2012. And President Morsi became the president. And President Obama made a deal with the Brotherhood and gave them $8 billion in order to give 40% from Sinai Peninsula to Hamas and become a training camp to a new Al-Qaeda in Egypt. And when the Egyptian people, 40 million people, stood in the street in June 30, 2013, and overthrew President Morsi, and he got arrested by the military, Obama administration and Hillary, they call it a coup, which is it was a revolution. And as far as you remember, me and you, we said the next day here to explain to write a testimonial, because you were going to go to the Black Caucus at the time, and you want to give to President Obama that it was a revolution but by the young Egyptian people, and it was not a coup. Don't you think that was a big mistake from President Obama administration and Hillary Clinton to support the Brotherhood, the extremist group, against the will of the 40 or the 90 million of the Egyptian people?
I don't know if their intent, both the president and Hillary, was to support a coup. I don't think so. The responsibility is on both sides. We got Osama bin Laden. We did that. That's one of his achievements. And what happens with our monies that we give, we're always giving monies to other foreign nations. And the responsibility has to be on both sides to see that the monies that we give from the United States of America is used responsibly. And what happens is that the radicals take over. And that money gets out of hand. So I could say that he probably could have done more to follow up on how those dollars would be used responsibly by American values.
Turn it up like I was in a video on BT. You can't erase your past away, but you can take control. Rise above the rest and say, I want that joy. I want that joy. Hey, this giver was turning it up like I was in a video on BT. You can't erase your past away, but you can take control. Rise above the rest and say.
Her for her great hospitality at her house today. We all had a great time today, so thank you.
Yes, it was such a pleasure. I was so inspired by being a young woman myself that hearing her stories becoming the first African American woman in the California State Senate. Such an inspiration. Thank you. And thank you for coming to the Sean Delon Show.
This giver was turning it up like I was in a video on BT. You can't erase your past away, but you can take control. Rise above.